My name is Courtney Cudd, and I am the Day Hub Director at Bridges of Hope. We are an emergency overnight shelter in Xenia, Ohio. I am not originally from Xenia, Ohio. I am from Columbus, Ohio. The Hilltop, more specifically, is where I was born and raised up until I was about 12 years old. And my childhood is pretty standard to know, or at least what I would consider to be pretty standard. And that was up until the time or age of about 10 to 12, which I really experienced the first true hardship in my life, or at least I would say, and that is when I began to experience some sexual abuse in my life. And so shortly after the conclusion of that, I moved to a different neighborhood and kind of escaped that. So what I learned very early on with that experience was an unhealthy standard of what relationships looked like. There was a lot of bribery involved in that. There was a lot of manipulation involved in that. And so that's kind of what, in my young mind, I understood a relationship to look like. Fast forward, I moved to a better neighborhood. My life started to look different, and I was, by all means, well adjusted and well adapted. I was doing well in school. I was, taking part in sports. I was National Honor Society, but I was still very much struggling with my relationships, and that means friendships. That meant my relationships with my parents at home, and I just felt very on the outside and excluded, no matter how included I was. Fast forward to college. The best way for me to be included in college was to drink and party and to really engage in behaviors that I thought were having a good time. Unfortunately, those behaviors were becoming intoxicated and inebriated to the point where I couldn't control my emotions or my behaviors, and a lot of promiscuity involved in that too. I eventually drank myself out of college. And got myself involved with a boy, and found myself pregnant. And so we got a place together. I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking, I stopped really doing much of anything, and had my son. I very quickly resumed my drinking and using after he was born. I got a quick degree in medical assisting. And after my son's father and I split, I got my own place and went to kind of pursue this new life as a single mom in the medical field. In the midst of that, I was introduced to heroin for the first time. So I think it's worth stating that in my drinking and using and partying, I had used alcohol very heavily. I had used cocaine, but not really any pain pills or anything too far outside of that realm of what I think most people kind of get introduced to when they're out drinking and they're very young. So when heroin was introduced to me, it was, I didn't have much prior knowledge about it, and I didn't have any lived experience. I didn't know anyone who was a heroin addict, and I had kind of this preconceived idea of, the junkie under the bridge, so to speak. Now I know that is very much a misconception, but I didn't have any experience with it. And so it's very important to say that working in the medical field, you administer medications to people through needles. And so I was very desensitized to the use of a needle because it was something we used every day. And so the night that heroin was introduced to me, they were using it intravenously. And so the first time that I used heroin, it was IV as well. And it didn't seem so out of the ordinary because, like I said, I was used to the needles. And what I didn't realize in that moment was that I had skipped a route that many people who go through opioid addiction, the pain pills, the snorting heroin, the smoking heroin, I had skipped all of that. And so I really hit this fast track to my downfall, really. And so what that looked like is that beautiful son that I told you about. I relinquished custody to his father when he was about a year old. And I really just immersed myself in everything using. I very quickly began to get in trouble with the law. I didn't have a valid driver's license. I got into car accidents and owed restitution. I I couldn't afford anything, and I, at most was becoming a shell of a human being. I was starting to really experience the withdrawals and the desperate things that we do to get our drugs when we're addicted. I won't stay too much in the war stories and the battles of my addiction, but what I can say is I ended up spending a lot of time incarcerated. I never made it to prison, but I did spend a lot of time in county jail, probably 2 years combined. I sold myself. I engaged in prostitution. I manipulated. I used. All of the stories that you hear time and time again, I'm no different. I'm not above. I wasn't a special drug addict. I wasn't a classy drug addict. I wasn't the more put together. I became everything that you hear the stories about. And so I went to treatment quite a few times. I was fortunate to have decent health insurance. I got into a marriage, and so I had a husband who would go just about to any length to try and get me into treatment and help me get sober that way. I unfortunately didn't take it seriously, and very quickly his attempts to help me get sober turned into enablement. And so since I knew I always had a safety net to fall back on and a warm place when things got bad, I never took treatment seriously. Even when I thought I did, I would say I was definitely the epitome of half measures, for sure. And so I would go into treatment, I would come out of treatment, I would do the same thing, and I have been in and out of treatment about 22 times, and that is the number of treatment centers that I can at least account for. I'm sure there have been many more, and I have been a repeat offender at many of those. So needless to say, it's not that the Lord and society didn't provide me an opportunity. It's that I just didn't reach out and grab that opportunity. And so the very last time that I was incarcerated, it was actually here in Greene County, and I had violated probation, and I had just lost somebody that I cared very much about to suicide. And so I was using, and I was really just off the rails, so to speak. And I decided to turn myself in on a warrant that I had, and I thought in my delusional mind, hey, if I turn myself in, they will, a round of applause, a pat on the shoulder, and we're going to let you go, and you won't face any consequences for this. And that is not what happened. Greene County decided that I should attend an in-house rehabilitation program that they have down there at the county jail. And while initially reluctant is putting it nicely, while initially reluctant, I got in there and I really started to do some healing. And I think it's worth noting too that in that experience, and it may be different now, but Greene County had single cells for people who were in that program. And having lost somebody that I just cared very much about less than 2 weeks before that, I spent a lot of time in that single cell with just myself, my memories, the decimation of my life, and God. And in my experiences and attempts at sobriety before, I heard about God through the 12 steps, through AA, through other people in recovery. And to be honest, the most that I knew about God was that he was something that was promised once you get past the 12th step, right? You have to do all of these things, do them well, do them right, and then you'll meet God. Excuse me. I didn't think I would get emotional, but the truth of the matter is, it was in those many nights alone in that jail cell that I did meet God. And I wasn't fully ready to really know him, but what I can say is there is no way I would have gotten through that time with any sort of sanity still attached had he not been there with me. I did complete that program, I got out, and I have not used heroin since, which has been some point over 6 years. I don't really like to keep too much track of exact dates and times. and specifics of programs and things like that, because I feel like it can be a little divisive. And at the end of the day, we're really just all trying to do the same thing, and it's make the best of what we can do today. Stay sober today, be the best person I can be today, and help somebody else today. So, but yeah, it's been a little over 6 years since I completed that, and I still had some struggles with alcohol and other substances since then. And so the last time that I was in treatment, I went down to Florida, and that was the last time that my insurance paid for a nice cushy treatment center. But I went down for alcohol that time, and I was just at this point where, you know, I had gotten rid of the heroin, and I couldn't understand how or why I had ended up back in treatment again. It's like I had kicked the thing that wrecked me, you know, and it had been a year and a half since I had been clean, and I picked up using again, and I was right back, if not in a worse position than I was before I stopped. And I had heard that time and time again, but I didn't really believe it. So I ended up in this treatment center in Florida, and it was called The Beaches, which my lovely husband that you met a few minutes prior, that's actually where I met him, which public service announcement, I do not ever recommend meeting a significant other in treatment, but it's inadvisable, but that is what the Lord saw fit for me. And so, but we worked individually on ourselves because we were both very, very broken when we met. And so, you know, we focused on ourselves. We went through 9 months of treatment. So detox, inpatient, the PHP, the IOP, we lived in halfway houses. We did it all. We humbled ourselves. We got jobs that didn't pay enough. We did almost all the things that were suggested of us. And we were able to save some money, and we moved back up here to Ohio. And we got a little apartment from a couple people who decided they were willing to rent to us, even though our credit was bad, our history was bad, and our attitudes might not have been perfect. But they don't know it, but they really opened the door to me getting to know God the way that I do know God. And so it was, I can remember very starkly, one night I was one day I was at lunch with the gentleman who is now my boss, and he said to me, "Hey, do you think you would like to come work at a homeless shelter?" And I thought, absolutely not. No, why me? You know, what really do I have to contribute to the people at a homeless shelter? I just don't think that I would be of much value there. So I said no. So I did it. So I came to work at the homeless shelter, and I worked as a monitor here for about 9 months, and it really gave me the opportunity to see that the stereotypes were wrong about what homelessness looks like, first and foremost, but it also gave me an opportunity to see me much more clearly, and I realized that serving people, no matter what that looks like, no matter what position I'm in, that serving people is, man, it's a one-way ticket to God, you know. And in my time here, I have been so fortunate and so blessed to be surrounded by people and pushed by people and called out by people and supported by people who have wanted me to look more to the Lord in everything. And man, to say that the Lord met me where I was at it's an understatement. I mean, he quite literally scooped me up and changed me almost overnight into somebody that doesn't even resemble physically or emotionally, and definitely not spiritually, the person that I used to be. And, you know, I tried all of the programs, and I tried them desperately. I tried them with all my might. I tried them in every, from every angle, any way you spin it, I tried, and I failed. And I think for me, and I hope that this is never heard or perceived as me knocking any of the A's or any of the programs, because what I know is that recovery is not linear, right? It is not a straight line, and there is no one right answer for anyone. But for me, I found those programs to be a little rigid, a little black and white, or pass or fail. And for me, I didn't do so well with that, because I thought, if I miss a night of prayer, well, now I've failed and my whole recovery is out the door. And so what I learned, and what I kind of changed my perspective on, was, you remember I said I thought that you only meet God at the end of those 12 steps. Once I met God, I was able to do those 12 steps. And that's how it went for me. God found me, changed me, and now I can do things like admit that I have problems. I can do things like take personal inventory. I can see where I've messed up, and when I'm wrong, I can go back to that person and really say, hey man, I messed up, and I mean it when I apologize. I can do all of those things. I talk to God regularly, and I have had a spiritual awakening, and I continue to have those all the time. And so it's really just, it's amazing. I cannot express how just thankful I am, but how the same I am as everyone else, right? I wasn't this substantially cooler drug addict, and I'm not this substantially more blessed recovering person. We're all equally valuable in the Lord's eyes, and so I guess that would just be my number one point that I want to drive home, that, we hear all the time, if I can do it, you can do it too. But if I can do it, anybody really truly can.